The year is 1488, and a hospital opens in Edirne, Turkey. It employs 10 musicians whose entire job is healing. They play specific musical frequencies for psychiatric patients 3 days a week. Every patient room is acoustically designed so the central fountain can be heard from every bed. Treatment is free and no one is turned away. Patients stay until they fully recover, no matter how long it takes. When they leave, they receive clean clothes and pocket money. That same year in England, the most advanced psychiatric treatment is chain. But here is what no history class will ever tell you. It was not that England had failed to invent hospitals. England had hundreds of hospitals, some operating since the 1100s, and then, in the space of 4 years, one man destroyed nearly all of them. The same formula repeated across centuries. That is the reason you need to watch this all the way through. The pattern does not just explain why hospitals disappeared, it explains why healing got expensive. Every American textbook teaches the same origin story. Pennsylvania Hospital, founded in 1751 by Benjamin Franklin and Dr. Thomas Bond, the first hospital in the United States. The implication is obvious. Before 1751, organized healthcare simply did not exist. People suffered at home or died in the street. Medicine was primitive. Hospitals were a modern breakthrough. Except that is a lie, not an exaggeration, not a simplification for the sake of narrative. A lie, because hospitals existed across every major civilization on Earth for over 2,000 years before Benjamin Franklin was born. Start with ancient Greece. Over 300 healing temples called Asclepians operated across the Mediterranean world. The one at Epidaurus kept detailed patient records carved into marble slabs. More than 70 individual case histories survive from 350 BC. Patients underwent fasting, purification, exercise, and then sleep therapy in acoustically designed chambers. This was not folk medicine. Hippocrates, the man Western medicine claims as its founder, trained at an Asclepian on the island of Kos. Galen, personal physician to the Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius, studied at the Asclepian in Pergamon. These temples operated continuously for over 1,000 years. Now move east. The first permanent hospital in the Islamic world opened in Damascus around 707. By the year 1000, Baghdad alone had 5 major hospitals. Cairo's Kalawan Hospital could care for 8,000 patients at once. Think about that number. 8,000 in a single facility. They had separate departments for surgery, ophthalmology, orthopedics, and mental health. Male and female wards were equally staffed and equipped. No patient was turned away regardless of race, religion, gender, or ability to pay. The hospitals kept written medical records for every patient, the first documented patient records in history. Students studied those records under supervising physicians and were examined before receiving diplomas. When patients were discharged after full recovery, they were given clean clothing and money to support themselves while they regained their strength. The hospitals operated around the clock. They were funded through charitable trusts called waqfis, endowed by rulers and wealthy citizens, so that no patient ever received a bill. By the late 1400s, the city of Cordoba alone reportedly had between 40 and 50 hospitals. Muslim physicians were performing cataract surgery with hollow needles 1,000 years before Western doctors attempted the procedure. In India, Emperor Ashoka established hospitals for both humans and animals in the 3rd century BC. A surgeon named Sushruta was performing rhinoplasty, cataract removal, and caesarean sections using more than 120 surgical instruments. This was 2,000 years before Pennsylvania Hospital opened its doors. So the question is not, when were hospitals invented? They were invented everywhere, independently, across millennia. The real question is, why Western history pretends they were not? And the answer to that begins with a king who wanted a divorce. In 1534, Henry VIII broke from the Catholic Church because the Pope refused to annul his marriage to Catherine of Aragon. He declared himself supreme head of the Church of England. And between 1536 and 1540 he dismantled every single monastery in the country. 900 religious institutions, destroyed in 4 years, the wealth was seized, the buildings were sold to political allies. In some cases, the structures were literally blown apart with gunpowder. Here is the part nobody talks about. Many of those monasteries were hospitals. They ran the almshouses, the leper colonies, the infirmaries for the poor. St. Leonard's in York was one of the largest hospitals in all of Europe. Bury St. Edmunds had 5 hospitals. St. Bartholomew's in London had been treating patients since 1123, over 400 years of continuous care. When Henry's commissioners came through, hospitals were swept up in the destruction almost by accident. They could not be legally separated from the monasteries that operated them, so they were demolished alongside the chapels and the cloisters. The Lord Mayor of London begged the king to spare the city's hospitals. Henry relented on exactly 3. St. Bartholomew's survived, so did St. Thomas's, and St. Mary of Bethlehem, which would later become the infamous Bedlam. Every other hospital in England was gone. The buildings were stripped for stone, the medical libraries were scattered or burned. 4 centuries of institutional knowledge vanished in less time than it takes to earn a medical degree today. The new landowners who bought the monastery properties had no interest in charity. They enclosed the common lands for sheep grazing. The sick and disabled were thrown into the streets. And here is the number that should stop you cold. There were no provincial hospitals anywhere in Britain by 1735, none. For 200 years after Henry's dissolution, ordinary English people had essentially zero access to organised healthcare. Elizabeth I had to pass the Poor Laws in 61, specifically to deal with the crisis Henry created. The voluntary hospital movement did not begin until the 1700s. When Pennsylvania Hospital opened in 1751, it was not inventing the hospital. It was rebuilding what had been deliberately destroyed 200 years earlier. And the history books erased the destruction so completely that we now celebrate the rebuilding as if it were the beginning. Some historians push back on this. They argue that monastic charity was already in decline, that Henry's own inspectors found the monasteries were giving only 5% of their income to the poor. But those inspectors worked for Thomas Cromwell, the man who orchestrated the dissolution. They had every incentive to make the monasteries look corrupt. More recent scholarship, analysing the 1535 Valor Ecclesiasticus, the actual tax records of the church, suggests monastic charitable provision was significantly higher than Cromwell's people claimed. But even if the monasteries were imperfect, the question remains, why were they replaced with nothing? For 200 years? And while England had nothing, the Ottoman Empire was running institutions so advanced that modern science is only now catching up. The Bayezid II hospital complex in Edirne opened in 1488 and operated for 400 years. The travel writer Evliya Çelebi documented the entire system in his 1600s travelogue called the Seyahatname. 10 musicians, including a reed flute player, a violinist, a harp player, and a lute player, performed 3 days per week. Specific musical modes called makams were prescribed for specific conditions: rast for mental illness, neva for agitation, buslik for general recovery. This was not guesswork, it was a systematized therapeutic protocol documented across centuries. The buildings themselves were designed as instruments of healing. Patient rooms lined the perimeter, constructed to create optimal acoustics and carry sound throughout the structure. Every room could hear the running water of the central fountain. Courtyards trapped breezes, controlled light, and created sensory environments calibrated to reduce distress. Patients with psychiatric conditions were placed near the fountain so the flowing water could ease their agitation. Each patient had a private fireplace. The treatment philosophy was explicit: unite the body and the soul. A 2023 peer-reviewed study indexed by Science Direct confirmed that Ottoman music therapy was a state-of-the-art mental health care model. I'm quoting the abstract directly. The study calls its relevance still palpable today. It notes that the systematic use of music for psychiatric treatment in Ottoman hospitals preceded anything comparable in Western medicine by centuries. I need to be honest about something. I almost cut this section. Ottoman sound hospitals felt like the kind of thing someone invents to fill a conspiracy video. Too perfect, too convenient. So I checked. Peer-reviewed journal. British Psychological Society coverage. UNESCO World Heritage listing for the Devriji complex. Evliya Çelebi's travelogue is a primary source from the 1600s. This is not speculation. It is documented, verified, and almost completely absent from English language education. But here is what truly unsettles me. Every one of these systems was free. The Asclepians, the bimaristans, the Ottoman hospitals, free treatment, free recovery, free discharge. And every single system that replaced them charged money. Which brings us to the second time they used the same formula. Between 1400 and 1700, an estimated 40,000 to 60,000 people were executed as witches across Europe. A 2023 study published through Science Direct analysed nearly 4,000 people accused of witchcraft in Scotland. Of the 142 whose charges specifically involved folk healing or midwifery, 90% were executed. I want to be careful here. Recent scholarship has complicated the old narrative that midwives were the primary targets of the witch trials. Many midwives were actually brought into trials as expert witnesses, not as the accused. The 1970s feminist framing overstated how directly midwives were targeted, but the broader mechanism holds. Decentralized healing knowledge, held primarily by women and passed through oral tradition, was systematically discredited and replaced by a credentialed, university-trained, male-controlled system. The universities were closed to women. Licensing laws prohibited anyone without university training from practicing. By the 1300s, English physicians had petitioned Parliament to imprison women who attempted to practice medicine. The knowledge did not vanish because it was wrong. Paracelsus, the man called the father of modern medicine, burned his own pharmaceutical textbook in 1527. He publicly admitted he had learned everything he knew from the women they were calling witches. The people who held healing knowledge were eliminated. The knowledge was then repackaged and sold back through institutions that charged for access. Same formula. Label existing healers as illegitimate. Destroy their networks. Seize or discard their knowledge. Replace them with a centralized system controlled by a smaller group. Rewrite the history to make the destruction look like progress. And if you think this pattern ended in the 1700s, I need to show you a document from 1910. In that year, a man named Abraham Flexner visited 155 medical schools across the United States and Canada. Flexner was not a physician. He held a bachelor's degree in classics from Johns Hopkins. He had been hired by the Carnegie Foundation. And the study was funded, in the Carnegie Foundation's own internal communications, covertly by the American Medical Association. 6 months before the report was published, Carnegie Foundation President Henry Pritchett wrote to AMA leader Arthur Bevan. The quote comes from a 2025 peer-reviewed article in the journal Curious. Pritchett wrote, "In all this work of the examination of the medical schools, we have been hand in glove with you and your committee. When our report comes out, it is going to be ammunition in your hands. It is desirable, therefore, to maintain in the meantime a position which does not intimate an immediate connection between our two efforts." The Curious article describes this as a classic smoking gun, and it is sitting in an academic journal right now. Within 25 years of the Flexner Report, more than half of all American medical schools closed. Every homeopathic college was eliminated. Every naturopathic college was eliminated. Every eclectic medical school was eliminated. 5 of 7 black medical schools were permanently shut down. Only Howard University and Meharry Medical College survived. Researchers estimate that had those 5 schools remained open, they could have trained 30,000 to 35,000 additional black physicians over the following century. Today, less than 4% of practicing American doctors are black, over 80% of them trained at Howard or Meharry, the 2 schools that survived. The AMA formally apologized in 2008, 98 years after the report was published. An entire century of missing physicians. An entire century of communities without doctors who looked like them, spoke their language, or understood their lives. After the closures, the Rockefeller Foundation poured funding exclusively into medical schools that adopted pharmaceutical-based treatment models. Schools that taught nutrition, herbal medicine, or community-based care received nothing. The Cleveland Clinic in Ohio was originally a homeopathic university. After the Flexner Report, the word homeopathy could not even be spoken inside the building. 3 purges, 500 years apart. And every single time the mechanism is identical. Label the existing healers as illegitimate, destroy their institutions, redistribute their resources to political allies, replace the free system with an expensive one, then rewrite history so the destruction looks like invention. 1536, 900 hospitals destroyed, wealth seized by the crown. Healthcare was replaced with nothing for 200 years, 1800s through the 1700s. Decentralized healing knowledge eliminated. Practitioners executed or legally barred, replaced by a credentialed monopoly. 1910, 82 medical schools shut down. Alternative traditions erased. The pharmaceutical model becomes the only model. Each time the formula runs, healing gets more expensive, more centralized, and more controlled. And each time the history is rewritten to make the destruction look like the beginning. They tell you Pennsylvania Hospital was the first. They do not mention that England had hospitals for 400 years before Henry destroyed them. They tell you the Flexner Report was scientific reform. They do not mention the letter where the Carnegie Foundation admitted it was working hand in glove with the AMA. They tell you modern medicine represents the pinnacle of human progress. They do not tell you about 10 musicians in Edine playing specific frequencies for psychiatric patients in 1488 in a building acoustically engineered for healing, where treatment was free and no one was turned away. Every source I cited in this video is publicly available. The dissolution records are in the UK National Archives. The Flexner Report is in the Carnegie Foundation archives. The curious article with the smoking gun quote was published in 2025. The Ottoman Hospital complex is a museum you can visit today. The marble patient records at Epidaurus have been there since 350 BC. None of this is hidden. It is all documented. It is all verified. It is simply never discussed. The question that keeps me up is not whether this happened. It clearly did. The question is whether the pattern has stopped, because every indicator I can find suggests it has not. And if you have been researching your own family history, if you have hit walls in medical records around the dates we discussed today, I need to hear from you. Because what I am finding in those records connects directly to what I found in the census data. And if that connection holds, the next video changes everything.